Good evening. Today I'll be arguing the point that good and evil are delusions. The term that needed to be defined was delusions. Delusions meaning human creations. My first piece of supporting data comes from the website ncbi.gov. In this article, it talks about how disorders in human behaviors that cause delusions as well as affect our reactions. Major premise. A major premise is that delusional jealousy, which can be looked at as an evil delusion, are common with alcohol abuse. Minor premise. Morbid jealousy comes from, or is a main cause, major contributor to extensive wife battering and frequent thoughts of homicidal behavior. Conclusion is that therefore jealousy is a human creation through alcohol abuse. My second piece of supporting data comes from the book Why is the World So Full of Injustice? The Problems, Gods, and the Problem of Evil. In this article, or this section of the book, it talks about Augustine and Caitlin defending the faith of the seven. It clearly states Augustine's second argument and its concerns with the cause of evil from our own free will. Free will being our ability to choose our own actions. Major premise: if as human beings we all have the right to free will. Minor premise: and the ability to freely decide how we react to life situations. Conclusion: then therefore as humans we create good and evil through our reactions. My third piece of supporting data comes from the book The Moral Landscape. In this particular section of the book, it states that it should not be hard to believe that people by themselves with no trouble or with no outside interaction or help could not only create good or create evil, but they could harbor false beliefs and they could harbor beliefs that are false and are demonstrably harmful. Major premise: every society that has ever existed has had to subdue certain aspects of human nature, being evil, territorial violence, cheating, laziness, through social mechanisms. Minor premise. And it would be a miracle if all societies had done this equally well. Yet, the cultural relativism assumes that such a miracle has not only happened once, but always. Conclusion: therefore, it is not a miracle that has caused things such as envy, violence, and stealing, but social mechanisms through human creations. Now let's talk about our counter-arguments. Take a look at our counter-arguments. My opponent may say, how can good be a delusion when it was created by a perfect creator? This is wrong because according to the Moral Landscape, it clearly states that any clinician, any any clinician can attest delusional patients often suffer from religious delusions. Therefore, you cannot base your you cannot base your therefore you cannot base not being a delusion, or you cannot base a human creation delusion off of religion, or a good not being a delusion on religious beliefs. My opponent may also say people with mental disorders cannot or aren't human created. This is not true according to the ncbi.gov website. It states that mental disorders are hereditary, genetic, or brought on by an unstable childhood. And therefore, people become more delusional from hereditary mental disorders. My opponent may also say, or may say, good and evil can't be delusions because based off human creations, because laws and court systems support them. This is absurd. According to academia.edu, the justice system was created by our forefathers, mankind, and their beliefs of good and evil. So what makes their beliefs non-delusional just because they were created hundreds of years ago? My opponent may say that other countries and other cultures have the same principles of good and evil as we do. This is not true according to OregonState.edu. It clearly states just because we have similar beliefs doesn't mean those beliefs aren't delusional. Therefore, these beliefs were put into place by older generations, so they are still created by human, or they are still human creations. My opponent may also say that social scientists, believe that all long-lived or long-standing human practices must be evolutionary, adaptive. For how else could they persist or stay in existence? This is wrong because according to the moral landscape, even the most bizarre and unproductive behaviors have been rationalized or even idealized by some dazzled ethnographer. Mere endurance of a belief system does not suggest it is adaptive. Therefore, it merely hasn't led directly to the society's collapse or killed its practitioners outright. Good ideas that were just implanted. Good ideas weren't just implanted from us or in us from birth. They were beliefs of many generations passed on from person to person, generation to generation, whose thought was that humans needed to have some kind of law and order or some kind of belief system where there was a right and wrong and there was a good and evil. This was an attempt to make the world a better place, or a so-called better place. But what if these ideas were never human creations? What would this world be like if no one ever told us the difference between right and wrong, good and evil? Would we just adapt evolutionary ideas of good and evil